سلام على والدي أحن القلوب علي. سلام على والدي أحن القلوب علي. لعينيكما زهر عمري وروحي وما في يدي. لعينيكما زهر عمري وروحي وما في يدي. وروحي وما في يدي. وروحي وما في يدي.
حبيبي أتدري حبيبي مكانك في مقلتي. حبيبي أتدري حبيبي مكانك في مقلتي. أحسك تبعد عني يا أقرب أهلي إلي. وهل كان غاية همي سوى نراك فتيا؟ يحاور قلبك قلبي وما القلب إلا بنيا. وما القلب إلا بنيا. وما القلب إلا بنيا.
أحب اقترابك مني ليكبر حلمك فيا. أحب اقترابك مني ليكبر حلمك فيا. فسلني عن أمنياتي فكم أمنيات لدي. وحلق هنا في خيالي وراقب فضاء مقلتي. وشكل مسار حياتي بما أودع الله فيا. بما أودع الله فيا. بما أودع الله فيا.
سلام على والدي أحن القلوب علي. سلام على والدي أحن القلوب علي. لعينيكما زهر عمري وروحي وما في يدي. لعينيكما زهر عمري وروحي وما في يدي. وروحي وما في يدي. وروحي وما في يدي.
أخاف عليك دروبا لكم اتعبت قدمي. أخاف عليك دروبا لكم اتعبت قدمي. وأخرى ضاعت شبابا كثيرا فتاه مليا. وما غايتي يا حبيبي سوى أن تعيش تقي.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Parenting Hour. You're tuned in to Unity FM 93.5 here in the West Midlands and 105.1 if you're tuned in to us in Milton Keynes this evening. Welcome to this evening's show. It's so nice having you listening to us this evening where we're doing a very important topic. I know each week I say this, but I feel each topic is really important, and we're so grateful for our parents coming on this evening to explain about perinatal bereavement and the effects that have on them. And we're especially focusing on dads this evening. Now, as you know, my name is Kathleen Roche-Nagi, and I'm here with you for the hour between 5 and 6 p.m. on Parenting Hour. But it is a pre-recorded show, and we are not going, it's not live for that reason. However, if you do want to ring in and ask the researcher any questions, who is Bekky, and I'll introduce her in a few minutes, the number is 0121 772 8892. That's 0121 7728892. I had to think there for a second. So welcome. Or you can email studio@unityfm.net. So wonderful having you here with us this evening, listeners. Please do absorb the messages that come out of this and pass them on to your friends, to your family, to your neighbours, so that we are actually getting the messages that come out of this evening to all the members of our communities and be able to help them. I'm going to pass over to Bekky to introduce herself and the project that she's working on and why we need to be having a show around this. Bekky, welcome to this evening's show.
Thanks, Kathleen. So my name's Bekky. I'm a trainee clinical psychologist. So I'm at the University of Birmingham, and I'm currently involved in a research project that is looking at Pakistani men's experiences of perinatal loss. So we know that perinatal loss can be difficult for everybody involved, and there's been lots of research looking at how it impacts on women and the sorts of things that services need to be doing to be supporting women. And I think more recently we've had some research looking specifically at women in the Pakistani community as well. But what we've noticed is actually, in terms of the research, there is really nothing about dads and what their experience has been, and especially dads from the Pakistani community as well. And I think it's really important that we open up this to hear their experiences, because we know that baby loss affects both men and women in different ways, and also in similar ways as well. So in terms of the research that I'm involved in, we're hoping to try and understand how men have coped with the experience of losing a baby, and try and understand what support's been helpful, what hasn't been so helpful, and really what services can do to make sure that they're both appropriate and accessible for men in the Pakistani community.
Great. That sounds really good. I don't think there's too much research on men going on out there. So I think we're quite unique, especially in our Pakistani community, indeed, and trying to know their needs and make services better. We're very privileged actually this evening on the show to have a couple. We have Sister Shaz and Brother Hafiz, who have given up their times this evening to talk about their experience. So I want to welcome them to the show. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to you both.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you.
It's just a privilege for us to have people like yourselves who have gone through this, who are giving up your time to share that experience with our listeners so that we can all learn from this. And I'm sure both Bekky and myself will have questions to ask you about this indeed. But first, maybe if you can tell us a little bit about this, the circumstances and how long ago and what happened, just to put it in a bit of a framework for our listeners.
So basically, we've had a total of 5 miscarriages, and they've varied from about 9 weeks to about 16 weeks. And the very first miscarriage was in 2014, and the last miscarriage was last year.
That's been very hard indeed. Very, very difficult, and you're very brave to come on and talk to us about this. Do you have any live children?
I do. In between the miscarriages, I have managed to have a little boy and a little girl, and they are now 6 and 4.
6 and 4.
Yeah.
So, would you, alhamdulillah, may Allah allow them to grow, mashallah, into beautiful young adults, inshallah. Ameen. And inshallah, grow your family also, inshallah. Over the years, you know, when you've had these miscarriages, have services changed, and how have you managed?
So the miscarriages actually took place when I was living in Saudi Arabia. And it was very difficult because there were no services as such, and it would be a situation of, yes, you've had a miscarriage, you can go home now, and that would be the end of it. And everything else, it was literally just me dealing with it on my own, and my husband supporting me.
Mm.
So it was very difficult.
Really, that is really difficult. And the recent ones that you've had, was that in Saudi Arabia too, or was this here in the UK?
No, that was here in the UK. And at that point, one, I didn't know I was pregnant, and two, I thought I was going to the hospital for a different issue, and that's where they informed me. And they offered me, counseling and other bits and pieces. But this was then my fifth miscarriage, and I know I was able to deal with the 4 previously, so I knew I'd be okay dealing with this 5th one as well.
And you were able to deal with this. If we move over to Dad, how did you manage, brother, to deal with all of these miscarriages?
आपको कैसा लगा
हाँ
ये सारे miscarriages के साथ?
हाँ बिल्कुल, जाहिर सी बात है, आपको जब वो उसका अफसोस होता था, आप ऐसी वो रहती थी जैसे कमजोर सा बंदा होता है। तो मुझे बहरहाल मैंने आपको सपोर्ट यही किया कि आपको प्यार से ये सारी चीजें समझाई, और जिस वजह से आप जो है रिलैक्स रही हैं।
He didn't really think about himself. He's saying he was more concerned about me because at that point I was going through a lot physically and mentally, and he was more concerned about my state of mind.
Did you even think at all at any stage about yourself and what was happening to you as a dad? And have maybe I'll ask this first.
आपने कभी खुद के बारे में सोचा कि आपके साथ क्या हो रहा है, आप बाप हैं?
हाँ, होती है, फीलिंग होती है, लेकिन जो वुमेन के साथ होता है, ये जितना वो,
फिर आपको क्या फीलिंग होती है?
फीलिंग होती है, क्यों नहीं होती, उसकी अच्छी खासी फीलिंग होती है कि मेरा बेटा जो है या बेटी मेरा जो है वो इस तरह वो हो गया है, महसूस होता है, बहुत ज्यादा फीलिंग होती है। लेकिन ये है कि उसको मैं जज्बाती अंदाज में तो नहीं कह सकता जिस तरह औरत करती, तो बल्कि मैंने तो आपको वो हेल्प करनी होती है, इस वजह से मैं उसको ज्यादा वो नहीं करता।
Oh, he's saying that yes, he did feel the loss of all the children, but he wasn't able to express himself because he felt what I was going through was more important, because I was actually suffering with it physically as well as mentally.
Yeah, I'm sure that is something that you come across a lot, Bekky. Is that right?
Yeah, something that I've heard from dads themselves about how often their wife is the priority in that situation, and it's really difficult to think about your own needs because you want to make sure that your wife's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
as well.
Definitely. Is there any question you have, Bekky, for Dad, before I go to my next question?
I was just going to ask, I know you've mentioned that it was difficult to sort of think about your own needs when your wife's obviously like the most important in that moment. Was there anybody that you would have thought about reaching out to try and sort of process what had happened?
आपने कभी किसी से बात की कि मैं किसी से बात करके अपना दिल हल्का कर?
हाँ, ये तो होता है जब अच्छे दोस्त के साथ
किसके साथ बात की?
वो दोस्त मेरे जो थे, मेरे साथ के बचपन से मेरे दोस्त थे, उनके साथ मैं शेयर करता था ये बात, तो वो भी मेरे साथ ऐसे शेयर करते थे ये बात ऐसी।
Yeah, so he was able to talk to some of his close friends, his childhood friends, because they would discuss all types of things, and he feels grateful that he was able to speak to them.
वो भी मेरे साथ डिस्कस करते थे ये।
Yeah, they also used to discuss their issues and their concerns as well.
I think that the support is so important, isn't it? Having somebody else that you can talk to about what's happened.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Is there a kind of an attitude in going between not even just Muslim families but families in general, that actually the man doesn't need that support or help, that it's the woman's body, because physically it's the woman's body that's going through that? Is there a perception that dads don't need this help, do you think?
I believe I believe they do need help, because I would, I felt with each of my losses, I needed to talk about it because that was helping me. And I couldn't just, shove it under the carpet, so to speak, and ignore that it had happened. And I wanted him to speak about it more to me, but he wouldn't speak to me because each time we discussed it, I'd end up having a breakdown. So that's why he felt like he couldn't talk to me, but it isn't discussed enough. I mean, loss in general isn't discussed enough, and it's the persona that people have. Oh, it's okay, at least you've got pregnant, but that's not the point. It's the point you've lost a child. And sometimes people don't understand that.
Definitely.
That is so true indeed. Do you think things have changed from in our environment now, or do you see any difference from when you've had your first or second miscarriage to last year when you had your last one?
Definitely. I mean, there is more help available now. This help wasn't there before, and I think as time goes on, things will get better, and dads especially will get the additional support that they need as well. We recently attended an approachable parenting workshop regarding baby loss, and my husband wanted to come with me, and he was one of two dads that were there. And that actually, if anything, that made me feel proud, the fact that he's able to attend a meeting where he was literally outnumbered. And the fact that him and the other dad were able to voice how they felt. And it's easy. I mean, you always think, yes, the woman is going through, but it's the dad. It affects him as well. It's his child as well.
Definitely, it is indeed. What would you like to see different, Sister Shazia, yourself, for supporting for you and for him, and maybe he might be able to contribute some things also. What would he like to see different? What would he like to see changing?
Well, to be honest, after we left that was that workshop with approachable parenting, as we were leaving the building, he turns around and he says to me, that's the first time I've ever discussed it in an open environment, and I actually feel good about it. And he said to me, next time there's something else going on like this, make sure you take me with you.
Oh, that's really good. So talking about it, this doesn't cost very much actually to put on things, to bring people together, to be able to talk through and go through this process. Is there anything else that you would like, or he would like? Now that we've got you on, we're really putting you on the spot, I'm afraid. But if you had a magic wand, I know you don't believe in magic, but if you did have this wand and you were granted 3 wishes, what would those 3 wishes be?
Well, that's a very big magic wand, I have to say. All I would say is I'm currently expecting at the moment, and I would like everybody to just give me their prayers.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah. And your husband, Brother Hafiz?
आपको क्या चाहिए? ये जो जैसे वो नहीं, जैसे ये सारा सिचुएशन है ना, जैसे मैंने इनको कहा ना, आपको अच्छा लगा था उस दिन हम गए थे, सो ऐसे फिर से हो तो आपको अच्छा लगेगा?
बिल्कुल, व्हाई नॉट। और दूसरी बात ये है कि मर्दों को थोड़ा सा इसमें इन्वॉल्व करना चाहिए, ताकि उनको बताएं कि अगर आपकी वाइफ के साथ ऐसा हो तो अपनी वाइफ को कैसे हेल्प कर सकें। उनको ज्यादा समझाने की जरूरत है ये चीज।
Right, so he's saying it's important for men to get involved in things like this, in matters like this, because he's actually seen it many times where the wife is not supported, the wife or the partner is not supported enough, doesn't get what she needs from the husband, and that's where you have relationships that break down. And we actually recently met a lady who'd had 13 miscarriages consecutively, and her husband actually blamed her for each one. And it's just about, getting these sorts of people to attend little workshops to get them to understand, this is exactly what happens. This is how a woman feels. Everybody's different. It's not like how long is a piece of string, but just to get them more involved so that they have a better understanding of the whole situation.
Oh, that's so important indeed. And I think this is what Bekky probably wants to hear from you. And I'm sure she's definitely going to make an appointment with you to get all of this information from you and from other dads as well, to be able to put on that support. And I know when we're doing parenting programs, that often dads like to have their own little program together with their male trainers, so that they can freely discuss and be open without any impacts or any preconceptions. And maybe it's the same here, that we need to have dads coming together to forming some sort of a more organized support group indeed, that they can support each other themselves, but then they would be able to support other dads that are coming through this for the first time, that don't know where to go to. And
yeah, definitely. I mean, the only downfall my husband has is he speaks 11 languages, but English is not one of them.
That's not a downfall. 11 languages, mashallah, is definitely not a downfall. I think there is a lot of people, brother, that will speak the same language as you. I'm sure 11 languages. There are a lot of people out there that are suffering, going through something similar, but don't know where to go to, don't know who to respond to ask for help, don't know even if they should be asking for help. Should I be feeling these things? And it's all this conception of the male macho, man, that they don't ask for help. Is that right, Bekky? Is that what you've got from your research that's coming through so far?
Yeah, there is this sense about it's almost seen as a weakness to ask for help, and I think similar to what's already been touched on, that because the woman is the one who's pregnant, the emphasis is on them a lot of the time, and sometimes there is this reluctance to kind of put your hand up and say, actually, this has been really hard for me as well as a dad. So I think we're getting there with trying to challenge some of those stereotypes about how men should and shouldn't feel. But I guess that's what the research is trying to look at as well, is actually what are some of those barriers maybe to come in and asking for help. Is it this macho stereotype? Is it something else? Or what more could services do to make asking for help that bit easier for dads as well?
Definitely, indeed. So we're coming up to a commercial break soon. Indeed, time goes by here quite quickly, and I know you need to leave us also. What could we summarize some of the key things from this that you would like to get across this evening to our listeners in your language? You can actually speak in the 11 different languages here, and just give the same message in those languages to the communities to come forward. If I pass over the microphone over to your brother.
तो आप खुद बताएं कि कैसे जैसे अभी आपने कहा ना कि मर्दों को बीवी के बारे में सोचना चाहिए एक्सेट्रा, आप खुद अपनी लैंग्वेज में बताएं कि मर्दों के लिए कैसे ये सपोर्ट जरूरी है।
अच्छा, मर्द कैसे करें या
ये कैसे उनके लिए सपोर्ट जरूरी है, यानी जब इस चीज से गुजरे।
औरतों को कैसे जरूरत है, मर्दों को नहीं कैसे जरूरत है?
मर्दों को लिए
हाँ, वो इसलिए कि
आप वहां बात करें।
सॉरी जब ऐसा मामला होता है औरत के साथ, तो वो जाहिर सी बात है उसे सपोर्ट की जरूरत है, बहुत ज्यादा जरूरत है। बल्कि वो अपने आप को बहुत ज्यादा तन्हा समझती है, तो उसके साथ हर वक्त कोई ऐसी हंसी मजाक की बात करें और अच्छे तरीके से रहें, उसकी जितनी हो सकती है इतनी हेल्प करें, खिदमत करें, उसको बेड से उठने न दें, इतना काम करें, तो वो ज्यादा अच्छा वो होता है। तो इसमें ये मर्दों को बहुत ज्यादा जो है इसकी अवेयरनेस की जरूरत है, ताकि उसकी मियाँ बीवी आपस में उनकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग अच्छी रहे और उनकी हेल्प हो सके, और ये बहुत जरूरी है।
And if you just could summarize that first, it sounded very interesting, but unfortunately I don't understand it.
So basically he's saying you should try and support your partner as much as possible through this loss, because it is difficult, and she will feel lonely during this stage, and upset and depressed, and it's your job as the husband to ensure she gets all the support that she needs. Try to keep her talking, give her support, make her laugh, help around the house. So yeah, give her as much rest as possible.
MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair. And that is really very good advice to give out to our fathers. And inshallah, if any of our fathers listening in this evening have gone through this, please do stay tuned in after this commercial break, where we're going to be talking more about how you can contact us and what support is available for you, indeed, inshallah. But now, as we're going into the commercial break, we want to thank you both. Thank you, Sister Shaz. Thank you, Brother Hamid, for coming. And inshallah, we pray for a successful pregnancy indeed. And please do keep in contact with us and let us know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Listeners, do tune in to us after this commercial break, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Parenting Hour. You're tuned into Unity FM 93.5 here in the West Midlands, and 105.1 if you're tuned into us on Inspire FM from Milton Keynes or Luton. We are talking this evening about perinatal loss, so that's loss of a baby in pregnancy and up to a year afterwards, but we'll clarify that with Bekky, because I know we're always trying to extend this to 2 years afterwards, but I think it's still a year afterwards. And we're particularly looking at dads and how the dad's voice is lost and what we can do to help and support dads. So if you were tuned into us in the first half of the show, you saw a wonderful couple who came on, who explained about their miscarriages they had and the effects on mom and on dad. And they were very open, and they were encouraging people to go and seek help and support. We have Bekky with us, who is doing some research on this. So Bekky can tell us a little bit about herself and a little bit about her research, and then the impact of this. Welcome, Bekky, to Parenting Hour.
Thanks, Kathleen. So yeah, my name's Bekky. I'm a trainee clinical psychologist from the University of Birmingham. So I'm currently involved in a research project which is looking at Pakistani men's experiences of perinatal loss. So we know that perinatal loss is a topic that hasn't really been researched much about, particularly in terms of men. We don't really know much about what men's experiences are or how baby loss affects them. We know it does affect them, but I think in terms of research that we've got, there's very little out there. So I think really we want to try and know more. We want to try and find out actually what is it that men would find useful in terms of support. Is that different to the support that we're currently offering women? And I think, thinking more about the Pakistani community in particular, there's not been any research about men from the Pakistani community. So again, when we're thinking about services that might be available to them, actually, are they culturally appropriate and accessible? Are they offering the right things and being sensitive from the community as well? So I think in terms of my research project, we're hoping that the research is going to help us have this increased understanding of the needs of the Pakistani community, especially thinking more about men in relation to baby loss. And we're hoping that it's going to support professionals as well to think about how current services might be able to be adapted and developed further, just to be that bit more accessible and sensitive to the needs of a father from the Pakistani community. We want to sort of understand how you might have coped with these difficult experiences, what things were helpful, what wasn't so helpful, and were there any particular barriers when you were thinking about accessing services, anything that made it more difficult or might have stopped you from doing that. So this would be done through an interview with myself. The interview would last for about an hour. It's obviously confidential. Nobody would know that you've participated in the interview. you'd be given a different name. And we could do the interview face to face, or we could do it over Zoom if that feels more comfortable. Like, we're happy to be flexible to whatever sort of makes it easier for you to participate, really. If this does sound like something that you want to know a bit more information about, then I can share my email address. Shall I read that out, or do you want to?
I think it might be a bit difficult to share that because people often are driving to when they're listening to the show, and it's a bit difficult to take down an email. But what we can do is tell you, listeners, the Unity FM number again. And if you ring in Unity FM, they will pass on all the queries to Bekky, and Bekky then can contact you. So that number is 0121 772 8892. 0121 772 8892. And you can email that at the studio at unityfm.net. And we have great studio managers that actually pass over that information very quickly to you, Bekky, and then you'll be able to contact those people that are emailing in. When I mentioned earlier on perinatal, just clarify, is it up to a year?
So, yeah, that there is kind of current negotiation about this within NHS services. So I think they are looking to try and increase that to up to 2 years after. But that's obviously under discussion. I think in terms of this research, we'd initially thought about people who'd experienced a loss within the last 3 years, but we are looking to extend that now because we recognise that there's people who've experienced loss over longer periods of time as well, who would really want to talk about their experiences and try and help. So in terms of this research, the time frame since the loss doesn't matter. We're happy to hear from anybody, because that experience is the same no matter when your loss was. So we really want to hear from you. And
is there a time when is the loss? So any time in pregnancy, or is there cutoff periods that you need in specifically?
No, so the term perinatal loss, I think it's quite a broad term, and it includes a lot of different aspects of loss. So we're not focusing on a specific type of loss or at a specific point in pregnancy. So just as long as there has been an experience of loss, unfortunately, then that's what we're looking for, is to just hear your experiences of what that loss has been like.
So parents or dads listening to this evening, and it could be granddads as well, but actually dads as well, or it could be your brothers, your sisters, well, your brothers, because we're looking at brothers, your uncles. Please pass on the message to them to contact Unity FM, and we will pass on the details to Bekky, who will do an hour or so interview with that person to find out a little bit that will help not just that person to hopefully in relating their what happened to them, but also in helping others. Why specifically, Bekky, did you choose to research Pakistani men? That's something I was just thinking there. We probably don't have an awful lot of research on non-ethnic minority men as it is, but you actually filtered that right down to Pakistani men. Can you tell me what was your reasoning behind this?
Yeah, so there is actually some research around perinatal loss in white men. So there's been quite a few studies now about that. So I think in terms of thinking about research, we didn't want to repeat things that had already been done, because that's not helpful in research. And we want to try and see actually what's missing here. What is it that we don't really know much about? And I think speaking to some of the NHS services, they'd sort of informed us that within Birmingham there is this higher rate of perinatal loss within particular communities, and Pakistani was one of those that was discussed. And I think one of their sort of interesting points was that although there's higher rates of loss in this community, they're sort of presentation to services is actually less in comparison to other ethnic groups. So I guess that kind of started at some of the questions about actually what is it about NHS services that maybe aren't meeting the needs of the Pakistani community, and actually we need to try and find out what it is that the Pakistani community need from us, because we can make those assumptions, but myself being a white female, I can't make that assumption because I don't know what it's like to be a man in the Pakistani community. So that's why we've sort of really focused in there, because actually we want to know this information, because we want to think about how can we make our services more useful for you, or actually have we got it wrong entirely and you don't need our services. So again, it's just asking those questions and being quite curious about actually what is it that the community needs from us.
Mm-hmm. Because I'm sure there's some people listening in this evening that are not Pakistani, but would be Muslims, which would have very similar ways of dealing with this and using their faith to help them to overcome and to process what has happened. And they may think, why not me? Why are we Pakistani people only? Because I've been through this and I know what has happened, and I have found it whatever way I found it, or I found this that helped me. So how could we help those others, or what should we say to those other people that are listening in and maybe have that question?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think in terms of research, this is obviously like very, very early, and it's hoped that once we've sort of started research, that more research will develop. So this is kind of a starting point, and it might be that further projects come about looking at other groups of individuals as well. I think for those individuals, we obviously don't want to ignore the fact that they've experienced loss and have either found something useful or not useful. So although they wouldn't be able to participate in the research, I think it's still useful for those people to know that there are organisations out there that want to hear their voices and want to be able to offer additional support. So like the family that were on earlier, kind of talking about going to the Approachable parenting group and hearing just other people's stories. I think loss, it's that collective thing that you've all experienced, irrespective of religion or culture or ethnic group. So that would be my sort of advice, is that we're, although this particular research isn't focused on maybe the group that you identify with, that's not to say that we don't know that you're there. We know that you're there, and your views are also important. I think at the moment we're just starting off small and hoping that we can expand out with further research in the NHS in the future.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully, indeed, that would be very useful to have that. If you, and I asked this to our parents, when I'm going to ask you, if you had that magic wand and you, your 3 wishes or whatever with that magic wand, and we know there's no such thing as magic, but I'm just trying to kind of put into context here. What could you see? Would you like to see in place to help, because you've done a lot already on this, a lot of work in this, in perinatal loss? What could be there to help our families, especially our dads?
I think having peer support workers is really, really important. So I think when having another dad who's gone through something like a dad has, I think that can be really, really powerful in terms of just knowing that person has been through the same. And I think asking those questions about, oh gosh, I felt that way as well, someone that you can just be like, actually no, it's okay to feel that way. That's how everybody feels when they have lost a baby. So I think that can be really powerful. And I think just trying to open up more conversations, because I think that the family touched on it earlier, how baby loss isn't really something that is spoken about, and I think there is still this taboo that we need to challenge and make it something that is spoken about, because like that lady said, she felt ever so lonely and was sort of reliant on her husband. And I think, gosh, if she felt lonely, I wonder how dad was feeling as well, you know, having to hold on to that loneliness almost. So I think continuing to try and break down some of these barriers to think about, you know, what is it about perinatal loss that is really hard to talk about, and what can we do to try and make these experiences better for people.
Mm. Indeed, and I suppose that comes back down to funding when you're talking about this, and it is essential and necessary, because when we are doing this, we're building back up families again, building back that resilience, that family unity, that bond, which can often, you know, be frayed during this period.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just knowing that it's okay for it to be like that as well. I think, you know, like the father said about just wanting to be there for his wife and sort of forgetting that he also had needs as well. I think you know, understanding more about that, and trying to encourage dads to put their needs first as well, because their needs are also as important as their wives.
What are some of the things that dads, emotionally wise, may experience from your experience? Like what are the things that, I know every dad is different, but if you could give us some examples of, you know, what dads do, and the different ranges of examples.
Yeah, so some dads, they might feel quite low in mood, so they might feel quite tearful. They might not have much motivation to sort of go out and do things. Some dads might find that they're bottling a lot of their feelings up, so they might feel very overwhelmed and not really know sort of how to express that, or what to do with it, because they're very conscious that, you know, my wife's just been through this really awful thing. I need to be strong for her. That there's a lot of feeling around, actually, no, I need to be strong because she's the one that's experienced the loss. Whereas actually for dads, they've still lost, you know, that child was and is still theirs at the end of the day. Some dads might feel quite anxious. They might feel quite worried. I think particularly if you've had a loss and are pregnant again, there can be a lot of anxiety around the next pregnancy and the baby, the mum, kind of what's going to happen. And I think sometimes there's this feeling of guilt as well, you know, if dad has these feelings, almost feeling guilty, because again, there's this belief about, well, I haven't experienced the loss, so why do I feel this way? So again, I think that there's a lot of conflicting emotions that can come up, and a whole range of different sort of emotions and behaviours. I think some people like to keep busy, so some people might go kind of straight back to work, straight back to doing things, and other people, again, they might struggle to get back to kind of like a normal way of life. So I think there's, you know, that there isn't a right or a wrong way to grieve when it comes to baby loss. But I think that can be really difficult for some people to understand, because I think sometimes it's like, well, what should I do? What should I do in this situation? How should I feel? What should I say? And actually, that there might not be an answer to that, and I think that can be really hard as well.
And all of those things that you mentioned may prevent even fathers from coming forward, because maybe you just mentioned about guilt. They may feel guilty that, you know, I've had to work very long hours. I've had to have 2 jobs. Maybe I wasn't at home to help with the other children, or to help get the shopping, or to help where I should have been there. And that guilt may even prevent them from coming forward, because they don't want to talk about it, you know, they don't want to acknowledge it, what's going on for them.
Definitely, because I think for some people, depending on your beliefs, you might kind of feel that being a father is your role. That's what you were born to do. And I think for some people there could even be that element of shame that you've not been able to fulfill that role. And again, that might be why people don't feel comfortable sort of coming out and talking about it, because it brings up a lot of difficult feelings about actually who they are now, like, in terms of their identity, about, you know, from the start of pregnancy, they're starting to get those feelings about being a father, and they're aware that they've got this child, and then suddenly that's sort of taken away. So I think it's a very confusing time.
A very difficult time indeed. And you know, dads in the whole pregnancy and birth is often forgotten about.
Definitely.
And, you know, we work hard to try and bring in dads and to include dads in families, but it is very easy to kind of sidestep that, especially when something goes wrong. You know, when something goes wrong, the whole tension, everything is around mom, and everybody's racing and looking at mom, but dads are just kind of pushed aside there, and they're left to get on with things. And you know, and you mentioned this, some severe things that can be happening to dads. How can we get dads to kind of, if a dad is listening in this evening and has gone through this and want to start processing, or want to start working through it, want to start looking for help, want to start doing this, where do they start? Where would they go to as a result of us bringing up this topic this evening?
So I guess in terms of thinking about help that they might want, there's a few different avenues, I suppose, depending on what feels right for the dad, because I think some people feel quite able to sort of access NHS services, and other people would prefer to go through sort of charities and other organisations. So for example, in terms of approachable parenting, there's counselling support that could be offered there. There's also the Lily May Foundation, who are starting I know that they've got a dad's podcast, and they're trying to get started with the dad's group. And that's open for anybody who's experienced loss in terms of thinking about support. I guess if dads are noticing that they're kind of really struggling emotionally, going to their GP and seeing about what services might be available to them. So it might be that they're offered an assessment to think about actually what would be helpful for them, what are their needs, and what can we do to support them during this time. And I think knowing that, you know, it doesn't matter how long ago that you experienced a loss, because it can still impact you. You know, whether that loss was 20 years ago or last year, it's still a loss, and it's going to have an impact on you in some way.
Definitely. So dads, please don't suffer in silence. There is help there for you. If you're not a dad listening to this evening's show, but you know of a dad that could do with help, please pass on these messages to dad. If you've forgotten about the names of the organizations that Bekky mentioned, please ring in Unity FM. The studio managers there will pass on Bekky's details, or the other information that was mentioned in this evening's show. The studio number again is 0121 772 8892. Bekky, I know we have only a few minutes left now before we come to the end of the show, but we want you to please just tell listeners what it is that you're looking for. Who are you looking for to come forward to help with this vital research so that we can help other people?
Yeah, so we're looking for men from the Pakistani community who've experienced baby loss. So that could be a miscarriage, it could be a stillbirth, or it could be a neonatal loss. So any kind of baby loss is what we're looking for. In terms of time frame, we're looking to open this up a little bit. So we had thought about in the last 3 years, but we're aware that for some people that might feel a bit too soon. So we're happy to talk to any man who's experienced a loss over whatever time frame. Doesn't matter if you've had a loss and have had a living child after, or, you know, just as long as you've experienced baby loss, we want to hear from you. And we just want to hear about your experiences and the support that you've received in an interview with myself.
Brilliant. And that is any ethnicity Pakistani man. They could be born in this country but still describe themselves ethnically wise as Pakistani. Is that correct?
Yeah, so as long as they identify as being part of the Pakistani community, then we'd like you to come and talk to us.
And what happens if we have somebody like our lovely brother in this first half of the show who doesn't speak English, speaks 11 languages, but English is not one of them? How are you going to manage, or can you manage that?
Yeah, so I'd say if English isn't your first language, or you don't feel kind of confident having an interview in English, do still get in touch, because we are in the process of thinking about what we could do to support this group of people. We may have options of interpreters that we can use. In terms of kind of research ethics, I just need to go back and check with the relevant organisational bodies that that's okay to do. But I would say please still get in touch, because I'd rather know that you're interested, and then we can think about adding on interpreters if we need to, because I think we don't want to miss voices. We don't want to miss important voices just because of the language, because your experiences are still just as valid and just as important. So do still reach out to us.
Definitely they are. And you're reaching out, looking for help is so important to all of us, actually, for you, each individual, for each couple, for each family to be there. And the fact that you're doing this, not just for that you will gain from it yourself and your family will gain for it, but the community will gain for it. And the ripple effects of this will be huge indeed.
Yeah.
How we can put on other support organizations, as you say, train up men to support men, have men trained up in different languages. All of this needs to be discussed as part of this research, isn't that right? So that we can change things.
Definitely. I think we can't do that without your voices, because they have the power to change. You know, we could sit in organisations and have ideas, but I think what we're missing is the voice of a man from the Pakistani community. And we really need that. It's really, really important.
Excellent. Thank you, Bekky, for coming on this evening's show. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you, listeners. You're welcome. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. If you know of one man that has gone through this, please do phone in 0121 772 8892. Until next week, have a great week, inshallah, and look after yourselves. Assalamu alaikum.